So we're now up to Daf Nun Chesamid Beis, and we're speaking about a pasuk in Chumash that says, "Kol sheretz hashoritz ala oretz sheketz hu lo ye'achel." So we're talking about creeping creatures that creep on the ground. So now, in order to generate an Isur Achila of worms and insects, it's got to have crept on the ground. That's what the pasuk says. Now, if these worms or insects develop inside a fruit. Now, I don't know what that means exactly. Maybe they came from the outside or spontaneous generation, whatever it might be. Then they are permitted because they never crept on the ground. So Shmuel is teaching us here, as we saw in Omid Aleph, that if the fruit is still attached, then it has the same status as mechuber lekarka. And if it's mechuber lekarka, it's attached to the ground, then since this he calls it a cucumber, we call it a squash, became wormy while it was attached to the ground, it's forbidden because then it's considered shoretz, hashoretz al haaretz. Hani tamri dekada, based on Rav Huna, we're going to derive a conclusion about dates. Now, these dates are not growing on the date tree, on the palm tree, but rather they were cut out, they were harvested, and then put into a container. Kada is a container. Now we open up the container and we find that the dates are full of worms. Sound familiar? Yeah. Anyway, lebasa tresa yarchi shata sharian. According to Rav Huna, we can assume that the worms or insects died if we wait 12 months. Now, I'm not sure exactly why you'd want to wait 12 months to eat dates, but that's your only choice because if not, you got to just throw them out. Now, the question here is, are you allowed to eat worms or insects that die? Surely forbidden worms remain forbidden even after they have died. The Gemara doesn't mean that the worms cannot live for 12 months and therefore you're allowed to eat the worms, but that they cannot endure. That is, after 12 months have passed, the worms will surely have died and disintegrated. And they turn into dust. And afer is mutter. Now, by the way, if there's any other insects or worms that enter into the fruit after the fruit is cut, because we're dealing with dates that were harvested and put into a container, those are certainly mutter, because that's not a sheretz hashoritz ala oretz. It never crawled on the ground. But what about the worms that entered into the dates before you cut them off and put them into a container? You waited 12 months, and those worms or insects turned into dust after 12 months. The thought occurred to me, a lot of people make a mistake. I don't know if you've ever encountered this, and they think that if you have a kli, some sort of utensil, a pot, that was used for tarfus and 12 months have passed, then it's kosher. You don't have to be tovel it, even though it's a bli of Isur. Now, I was wondering where they came up with this idea. Maybe from here, I don't know. Omar Rav, less baka bar yoma. Okay, I'm not sure what a baka is. I think a baka is a mosquito. But in my translation, he calls it how do you pronounce G-N-A-T, is a gnat, right? You don't pronounce the G. So Rav is saying that a gnat has a lifespan of 1 day. So it's machlokus between Chat GPT and Rav. There are mosquitoes that live for a week, 2 weeks, and under certain lab conditions, even 3 months. As I state in Chat GTP, whatever it is. Anyway, less didra barshat. A fly could live up to a year, but not beyond a year. Again, machlokas between AI and Rav. What about, there's a popular saying amongst people, or an adage, that Shev Shnei Imra Baksa Mibaka. Now, this is a fascinating thing. I don't know if there's any truth to this, but apparently the female mosquito is going to taunt the male mosquito and refuse to have relations with the male for a period of 7 years. The Amrale, because the female mosquito says to the male mosquito, Chazise, I caught you in the act. Lebar machoza, desacha b'maya v'solik v'ikrach b'sdinen u'matzas mineh. I saw a man from a place called Machoza that after he came up from the swimming, you, the male mosquito, bit him and sucked his blood when he got out and wrapped himself in sheets. Velo hodatli, and you didn't tell me. So if anyone tells you that the females are aggressive and dominate the males, again, the women's libers may be denied, I don't know, but you can quote him this Gemara about the female mosquitoes. Very domineering. They don't like the male mosquitoes to suck anyone's blood. By the way, I didn't get a chance to look up in AI, but I think mosquitoes are quite dangerous. A member of my family is susceptible often to a shoshana, which is called in English a cellulitis. You know anyone who suffers from cellulitis? Now, if you suffer from cellulitis, it's very dangerous because if you get it too often, the antibiotics don't kick in. And in the bottom of her leg, if she gets an injury or a mosquito bites her on the bottom of her leg, she almost automatically gets cellulitis. And as I said before, if you have a recurring case, it's not good news. Anyway, Amalei Litime. So again, we see that the female mosquito lasts for 7 years. So you can't tell me that, there's no such thing, as a 2-day-old mosquito. So Rav Papa says Utaimech. So you're analyzing adages. Hodiamri Inchi, what are you going to do with this adage? Shitin money. Now the number 60 here and monos or mana, what's the size of a mana? I don't know. It's a very heavy kind of thing. The number 60 is usually used by the Gemara as like an exaggeration, hyperbole. Parzala tolule labaka, bikur nasaya. In other words, when they want to indicate how dangerous the sting of a mosquito is, they say that this mosquito carries around a hammer, an iron hammer that is sharp and is very heavy. It's the weight is 60 manas of iron. I don't know, even the weightlifters can't pick that up, I don't think. Now, mi'ika, is there really such a thing? I mean, with all due respect to the common adage, who saw a mosquito that is so powerful? Iu gufe kamahavi, look at the gnat or the mosquito. How much does it weigh? It weighs nothing. So how can you tell me it weighs, carries around it an iron that's an iron hammer that's 60 manas weighty? Ella, but money did who? Apparently, excuse me. You could talk about these measures in relative terms. So when, one mosquito talks to another, he says to the other mosquito that we're talking about, your mana, the mana as relative to the mosquitoes. Hochinami v'shani didhu. So too, when it says that the female animal taunts the female mosquito taunts the male mosquito 7 years. That's in its own terms. Maybe it's 7 minutes. Tonight in Hossam, we learned in a Mishnah in Masechta Bechoros, and we're talking about whether or not a bechor is a balmum, or for that matter, any animal is a balmum. And now we're learning the sugya, which is called yeser or chaser. If an animal has a mutation and has either less than what's normal or more than what's normal, so balas chamesh raglaim, an animal usually has four. This animal has 5 legs, and yeshla shalosh, or it only has 3 legs, a 3-legged animal. Harezem mum, and therefore you can't bring it on the mizbeach. And in the case of the bechor, you just poda it as a bechor balmum. So a bechor balmum is mutal shchita, and then the kohen will eat its meat. Amar Avhuna. So the implication here is that if it's got 3 legs or 5 legs, it's not treif. It's just a balmum lemizbeach. Says Rav Huna, I want to qualify that. Lo shanu el shechasav yesa biyat. So now we're differentiating between the 2 legs of an animal that are forward, a foreleg, as opposed to the hind legs. And Rav Huna says that if you have an extra leg and it's only a balmum, but it's not treif, that's only with regard to the foreleg. If in the hind leg the animal has an extra or is missing a leg, then treifanami hafi my timer call yeser kidnotul dami. So we have a new principle here that's formulated by the Talmud in the name of Rav Huna, that an extra organ is considered as if it's missing an organ. So therefore, if an animal has an extra hind leg, it's as if it's missing a hind leg. Now, an animal that's missing a hind leg is treif, because we had our halacha that if the hind leg is dislocated, okay, I don't remember exactly where we had this, but earlier in the perek, then it's treif. And that's called Yoser Kinotul Dami. Hahi Chevasa. Chevasa is a chaya, an animal. Dahavile Tarti Sanya Dive. Okay, what's Dive? So all I can tell you, it's part of the intestines. Trying to remember, it's very complicated. I looked it up in AI. It's you can look it up. It's if you have a minute, maybe. So I don't have the time to do this now. It's called CECUM. it gets rid of certain it filters out certain in the digestive system certain like juices and liquids and things that could harm the animal. Aisul Ravina v'tarfa mida Rav Huna. Right, Rav Huna said that chaser kenotel dami, and this animal had, just 1 second, sorry. I'm sorry, called yeser kenotel dami, and this animal had two instead of one. So the word cecum is the plural, and this is going to cause, if it's kenotel dami, a dysfunction of the digestive system of the intestines.
I looked up CECUM. It's the beginning of the large intestine.
Yeah. Does he tell you what function? Ask him what function, how it functions.
Let's see if it says here.
Okay.
Located in lower right side of the abdomen, connects the end of the small intestine to the colon, acts as a reservoir for digesting food waste.
Ah. All right. It's complicated. So you really have to know anatomy again. Reservoir for
Digesting food waste.
digesting food waste.
Yeah.
It seems that a lot of animals have pure waste, they have to get rid of, and then they have waste that could still be redigested. And that's where this comes in.
It's
So,
like the cow, they say it, chewing its cud, it's redigesting the food.
yeah, I don't know exactly that, but anyway, it has something to do with the waste products, not the real food. Anyway,
Yeah.
where it is, it's somewhere located between the large and the small intestine. Now, if these two sesams are connected to each other, then it's considered as if they're one. So it's not considered yeser. Hahi guvta, okay, there's a tube which somehow appears in an animal in its normal. Dahavi nafka beikose lehov lila, okay, so extended from the beikose, that's the resiculum to the omesum, again, different parts of the digestive system. And Savar Rav Ashi Limichefe. Rav Ashi thought that this was abnormal, and therefore it's a treifa. Amalei Rav Huna Marbar Chil Rav Ashi Kol Hani Chivi Barasi Hachi. You made a mistake. This is not an abnormality. This is the way it normally is. If it's chive means animals that are barasi. Rasa means they spend most of their time outdoors. And in the anatomy of these animals, apparently this kind of tube of flesh is that extends from the beit kasi to the omasium is normal. It's not an abnormality. Now we have another case of an animal that was found with a tube of flesh. Davi ma'abra, it passed ma'avar like aver, right? Mi beit kasa lekresa, right? He went down from the resiculum to the actual stomach, or that part of the stomach in the earliest stage of digestion. Savar Mabravashi Lachshure. He thought that it's similar to the previous case, but again, here it's a little different. In both cases of Ahu Gufta, of this tube, but in the first case, it connected between the Beikasi and the Hovlila, but in this case, it connects between the Beikasi and the Kresa. And therefore, Amalei Rav Ashia, Atu Kula Bechada Mechita Machtina, as we've had many, many times, we don't make these comparisons and jump to any conclusions. And now you're weaving all these cases into one web, and you can't equate the two cases. Why? We have a principle that whenever we know that an extra tube in the digestive tract is normal, but in other variations, it's not normal. Okay. Haid Nasan bar Shila bar Avtav. Oh, so Nasan was the chief shochet in Tzipori, in the northern city of Tzipori, Lifnei Rebbe, and he testifies for the Rebbe al Shnei b'nei me'ayim hayotzim b'beima ke'echad. That somehow when these two intestines came out of the stomach of the animal, they were like parallel. And he testifies that the treifa ukenegna b'of kshera, but a corresponding situation in oaf would be kosher. An animal that has two sets of winding intestines leaving the abomasum, one leaving from the usual end, the other one leaving closer to the middle, that's treifa. However, such a phenomenon is occasionally found in a normal fowl. And even though we don't see this phenomenon ourselves, says Rashi, but the Rabbanan knew that it occurred. Whoa. They were great anatomists or veterinarians, whatever you want to call them. Mamurim. When do we say that the animal that has a dual intestine is treif? Sheyotzu b'shnei makomos, they're coming out of two different places of the abosam masum. Avol yotzu makom echad, they come out of two adjacent points. Then it's not a treif of a kolon, not etzba. If they're within a finger breadth one to the other, they join together, then it's kosher. Polig ba Rav Ami Rav Asi. This case of a dual intestine that came out of an adjacent point on the abomasum is a subject of controversy. Chad Omer, according to one opinion, who dehadrare v'arve. It means that the two intestines will unite and become one single tube, and therefore the animal is kosher. V'chad Omer, the other opinion is afal pi. I'm going to go a step further, and I'm going to tell you that if these two intestines conclude their separation within a finger's breadth, then it's kosher, even though the two intestines did not become one single tube, but rather they are joined together. Bishleim Elamanti Omar, who dehadri v'arve. According to the Mandiomer, who says that it's only kosher if they unite into a single tube. That was the second Mandiomer here. That's why the Brisa emphasizes that it has to be within a finger's width. That's considered as if they united into a single tube. It's kosher. Even if they did not unite into a single tube, is my ad the so I surprised to me when it says it's kosher only on the condition that they join together and conclude that separation within a finger's breadth. And the Gemara says ad ki etzba milamata. The brisa means that the two intestines must unite into a single tube within a finger's breadth of the very end of the intestinal tract. Rav Yehuda Omer im nitla hanotza psula. You remember there's something called a down that covers the chicken, and Rav Yehuda understands that down is what protects the animal from dying. If it was punctured, then the animal is a treifa. The bird is a treifa. Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Shmuel, Amud Over Echad. Rabbi Shmuel is going to reiterate the position of Rabbi Yehuda because Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Desnan, Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Notza Mitztarefes. Okay, what are we talking about now? We're talking about pigul. Now, let's understand that a machshavas chutz l'zmano in pigul only applies to basar, to flesh, not to skin. And Rabbi Yishmael says that with regard to the shear, the minimum shear for pigul, which is a kizayis, we can integrate both flesh and down, notza. meaning that down is called flesh. And if it's called flesh, then there's a chalosh shem pigul with a chiv karis if you eat it, and it means. Just 1 second. Just 1 second. Ah, sorry. Um, I had all the elements, but we're talking about pigul. We're talking about pigul on what? Just 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. I had it. Just 1 second. I had it. I had it. I lost it, and I lost. I had it, and it's lost again. It was. Um, just 1 second. Down, skin, and flesh combine to form the minimum measure of a kazais required to make it pigul because they're normally eaten. Let's just think about that. They're normally eaten. So how does that integrate with Rav Yehuda? So let me just suggest what I understand, that the word mitztarefes means that we're going to integrate A plus B because they have a common denominator C. What does that mean? When in the kazayas for pigul, we're going to integrate both skin and flesh to make up that kazayas. And he says that he's going to eat this combination chutz lizmano. And what's the common denominator that links the two? Says Rabbi Shmuel, they're both edible. In other words, despite the fact that it's skin, which normally is outside of the purview of pigul, because pigul is only on flesh and not on skin, because skin is not edible. Here we have, says Rabbi Shmuel, a case, a fluky case, exception to the rule, where the skin is edible, but it's skin. And in that sense, Rabbi Shmuel is reiterating the position of Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda said that the down is a skin which covers the entire bird and protects it, such that, like in the case of a flayed animal that's skin was removed, if you remove the down, therefore the bird is treif. And from the fact that Rabbi Shmuel used the word mitztarefes, meaning he classifies the down as skin, in that sense, he's reiterating the position of Rabbi Yehuda. Omar Rava says, Dilmaloi, I don't think I could commit Rabbi Yehuda to hold like Rabbi Shmuel and vice versa. Ad kan lo kom Rabbi Yehuda hacha. When does Rabbi Yehuda say that the down is like a skin that surrounds the bird and protects the bird? It's not like a feather. El in treifa. Why? Because in treifa we're talking about the vitality of the bird. Will it survive? Will it not survive? If you remove the down, then we treat it as skin that protects the entire being, the entire organism, and therefore now the bird is a treifa. If ipalu gefa pigul kirabanan svirle, maybe he disagrees with Rabbi Shmuel, and he holds that people don't eat the down, and therefore in this case of Malika and all that stuff, where he had a machshava of chutz zmano, it doesn't generate pigul because it's not necessarily edible. Viad Kana, now we go the other way around. Lo Kam Rabbi Shmuel, Chosam. When does Rabbi Shmuel say that we're going to treat it as mitzarefes and it's an edible skin, and therefore he had a machshav of chutzismano of pigul for an entire kazayis, elin ipaluge. In other words, even though it's only partially edible, but it's edible enough that it passes the main critical point, and therefore it's considered like the flesh, and it's integrated to form the kazayis for pigul, avola inyan treifa. However, this down is very soft; it's not tough, and therefore iguni lo megin, the animal will not be protected. So what keeps the animal alive? It's not the down, according to this understanding of Rabbi Shmuel, but rather the normal skin of the animal. And therefore, if you remove the down, it's not a treifa. Okay, achuzas dam. Now the Mishnah gives us a whole list of cases where you see certain phenomenon that are decaying and indicate illness, and it's a treifa. For example, an animal is seized with blood, like it has all of a sudden like a fever that goes through the ceiling. Hama ushenes, or the animal inhaled smoke. Vehamitzunenes, the animal all of a sudden got frozen. Sha'achlar defuni, which is a kind of a very poisonous plant. And ochla tzoas tarnagolim, it ate the dung of chickens. Osha shosas mayim haroyim, it drank very bad water. Let's see if he tells you here. Water that was left. This mayim agulim, right? So the snake left a gift into the water, namely its venom. Ochla samamovis is ate any kind of poison, that which is poison to human beings. Oshi kishanech, it was bit by a poisonous snake. Even though muteris mishum treifa. Now, I'm not sure. This muteris mishum treifa. Second. Just give me a second, sorry. He says here, in the name of the Meiri, I didn't see it in Rashi, that in all the cases listed here in the Mishnah, we have no reason to be concerned that the animal's intestines or vital organs were perforated. So again, let's go over what we know. An animal could be very ill and die, and you're allowed to shecht it. Why? Because even though it has a general illness, there's no particular organ that makes it treifa. Do you follow what I'm saying? We don't assume that the organs were perforated, right? All that we learned in this parak about elu treifas was with regard to organs that were non-functional because they were injured. Now we're talking about a general disease that will kill the animal. So what do you do in such a case? You shech the animal, you eat the meat before it dies. Again, the only question is, how do you know if it died because of the shechita? That we had a whole sugi about that. So he writes here, I think we said it even better than him, a treifa is an animal that cannot live because of a defect in its body. One whose body is whole and is dying because of some other cause, it's a dying animal, if it's shechted, you're allowed to eat it. However, the Mishnah adds that asur mishum sakonis nefashos. In all these cases, I'm sorry, forget about all these cases. Let's talk about Mayim Megulin, the last case. He says that it's forbidden to eat the meat because of the danger the meat poses to one who eats it. So it's interesting. He has a Bach who says just the opposite of what I said, that the Asura Mishum Sakonis Nefashos does not apply to the last case of the animal that drank from Mayim Magulim, because even if the snake let its venom into the Mayim Magulim, it goes through the digestive tract of the animal, and the animal's going to die. It's not a treifa, but it's going to die. But the flesh of the meat is not dangerous. Omar Shmuel. Okay, we have another 2 minutes. 2 minutes of overtime. Yeah, Hilita chiltis treifa. Okay, so there's an animal called a chiltis. I'm sorry. Chiltis is not an animal. It's called Asafoetida. Go figure what that is. Anyway, some sort of a dangerous, harmful, bitter herb. And it was fed to an animal. The animal is now treif my taima. The benakfi lehula mayona. The chiltis punctures the digestive tract of the animal. Masir Rav Shizbi says, I don't understand Shmuel. What about the Mishnah that we just learned? Achuzas dama mushenes. Shalchar defuni. It says explicitly, it says that it ate hardefuni, and yet the animal is kosher. Maybe you shouldn't eat it, but it's kosher. He'll eat tias chiltis upilpulim. Right, so it says here beferish that he fed it chiltis or peppers. The animal is kosher. Kelev shota mutes mishum treifa vasur mishum sakana. See, that's why I thought the asur mishum sakana was only referring to the case of a snake bite. That's the impression I get. Anyway, kasha chiltis achiltis kasha samamavis. Right, the Brisa says that with regard to chiltis, the animal itself is not a treifa. And Shmuel says that the animal was fed chiltis, the animal is treifa, and we have a stira here, bishum samamavis. The Brisa says that if it so now the steer is not in Shmuel; it's a steer between the Brisa and our Mishnah, right? The Mishnah said that if the animal ingested poison, it's dangerous to eat the meat of the animal. And here it says muteres. Just 1 second. What does it say? It says muteres v'treifasur mishum sakanas nefashos. And what does the Brisa say? That you're allowed to eat the meat. What does it mean you're allowed to eat muteres mishum treifa? It says here asura. I got If the animal was bitten by a mad dog, then you're not allowed to eat the meat of the animal. Rabies. But if the animal ate poison, then you're allowed to eat its meat. Whereas our Mishnah, in contrast, says that if the animal ingested poison, you're not allowed to eat its meat. Kviltis, achiltis lo kasha, kan be olim, kan be krotim. Right, this chiltis plant has different parts. It's got leaves, and then there's the grain itself. So as far as the leaves are concerned, it would not digest, it would not puncture the digestive tract, and therefore it's not a problem of whatchamacallit, of treifa, but Shmuel's talking about a different case where he ate not the olim, but the krotim, the grains of chiltis, which are exceptionally sharp and perforate the animal's digestive tract, and therefore the animal is treif, samamoves al kasha, hadi adam. The poison in the Brisa is a reference to something poisonous to the animal, but it's not poisonous to people, where the poison spoken in our Mishnah, that's something that's poisonous to a human being. The Gemara doesn't like Sama Mavs to Behema Hainu Hardafuni, right? How can you say that the poison referred to in the Bryce is animal poison when it says in the Bryce that we're talking about Hardafuni? Hardafuni is toxic to animals, but not to human beings. And the Gemara answer is Trey Gavni Samamoves. Okay, then this is where we'll stop. And if you can be here on Sunday morning at 8 o'clock, and then after that, 9 o'clock, we head off for 2.5 days. And if we can get together on Tuesday, you'll let me know what works for you on Tuesday. We could talk about that on Sunday at 9 o'clock after the Shia. Okay? So we're up to now about to start Nun Tes, which would be the Shabbos Amud. And on Sunday, we'll do Samach for Sunday. Anyway. And then we have Samach Aleph you'll have to do on your own. And on Tuesday, we'll do Samach Beis. So we'll still maintain, I think, one daf ahead of Daf Yomi. I think. You can check me out on that. Okay, then?